it's Natasha and thank you so much for joining me today. We have a really fun video where I'm going to show you all the window techniques. Now this technique, I'm going to show you lots of different ways you can actually do it. I'm going to show you lots of different mediums that you're able to use. I think that whatever you have in your stash, you're going to be able to make this work. Now there is one thing that I really do recommend, and this will make a big difference. This is the Gina K Masking Magic paper. Now I'm not saying that this is the cheapest one out there because it most certainly isn't. But in my opinion, this is the one that works the best. And by works the best, I mean mainly when I'm using wet media. Now that might include inks. When you are inking, you do not want any bleed through. You don't want it seeping underneath. These are the most frustrating things when you are trying to get a nice, crisp, clean look. And the best part is I save everything. So all of these offcuts that I've obviously done when I'm fussy cutting, these become my masking material or my low-tech tape when I'm trying to cover up bits on stencils that I don't want to include, or holding down a piece of paper or running it through my die cutting machine. I just save everything. I save it all. Any big size scraps go back into the bag, and any smaller ones I just use as low-tech tape. Now this is what I need to do today. I just want to cut strips. This is the window technique, so we are kind of creating like a window, like you're looking through a window, but really I guess it's kind of masking. Now I have cut some of these strips to be 1/4 inch and some of them are 1/2 inch. Now when it comes to putting these down on your piece of paper, it might help for you to have a grid background. I just have this one on a little portable cutting mat that I can use, or my favorite is the Holtz design ruler, and mainly because this one is 0 centered. Now if you are like me and relatively lazy when it comes to all these kind of different sizes of card that I cut, and I usually don't even measure the sizes so they're not even or anything, I just want to find the center. And so this ruler is something that really helps me. I know that that's lazy, but it's something that helps me and it just makes my life easier. And for the moment, particularly when I have a young family, life is all about being efficient for us, and especially when it comes to time. I think time is just so precious. So yeah, anything that helps me like this, which is only a few dollars, is really worth it in my opinion. Now the window technique is just kind of pretends like you're looking through a window. The masking gives the effect as though it's the window panel or the window pane. So in this one I have done the most simple version and have just done for the cross down through the middle and then horizontally through the middle as well. And then very, very simple, this one I'm going to do 2 different tones on each corner. So I have used some of that same masking paper to mask off one of the corners whilst I do a couple of different colors there just with some finger daubers. And you could also use low-tech tape to mask it off. You could use post-it notes. You could use just computer paper with a little bit of removable adhesive stuck down on one little edge of it, corner of it. You know, there are so many different things that you are able to use. Or if you believe in your skills, then you don't have to use masking paper at all. We do actually have that little 1/4 inch between, but knowing me and how I go, I just know that I need masking paper or something to stop me going over. So I'm just choosing a couple of different colors for each one. I'm trying to keep them kind of different, and for this I'm using the Distress Oxide inks. This is just the normal, this isn't watercolor paper that I am blending on, and honestly by the time you put things on top of these, the blending doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be the best blending you've ever done. I do find that when I'm using the oxides and the finger daubers, I'm going to get a reasonable blend, especially when I'm blending 2 colors that are next to each other on the color wheel. That makes life a whole lot easier. For example, I wouldn't put together you know, orange and green. That would just kind of make mud in the middle. I wouldn't put together blue and orange. Again, that would just make a mud kind of color. Yeah, you just have to kind of look in the color wheel, and things that go next to each other are going to blend nicely in general. So once I have got this one done, I decided that I didn't actually like that top left, or now the bottom left that I've turned it, corner. It was just a little bit too light in comparison to the other colors. So I'm going to go over it a little bit with some Twisted Citron, and then I come in with Peacock Feathers for the other side. And again, this doesn't have to be perfect, and even though my color choices might not be perfect, even for the ink blending, once I put things on top of this, we're going to be away laughing. So there is the first kind of one where you can use your Distress Oxides, and bear in mind you can use any inks for blending, by the way. You can use dye inks, hybrid inks, pigment inks, anything's going to work well. This one here, I have a smaller pattern. I know it's kind of hard to see at the moment given the masking paper is the same color as the paper essentially. I have some tumbled glass, worn lipstick and squeezed lemonade. You can do some watercoloring on top of this masking paper. Now this one here is going to be the real test because I add a lot of water to this one. This one is on a piece of watercolor paper. I use the Holtz watercolor paper and I always and only use the smooth side of it. It has two different sides. It has a textured side and a smooth side, and the smooth side is definitely my favorite. Now I just want to show you this new sprayer that I got. I saw Simon Hurley using one of these and I ordered one. This is the bee's knees. I am converted well and truly. This is a continuous fine mister. So you can kind of see the fine mist when I spray it here. It gives a long fine mist. No big droplets, nothing. So if you just want a really even mist on your paper, or you don't want to saturate it, or you just need a little bit, I'm really enjoying this one. I've been using it since I saw him using it a few months ago, and once I finally decide I really like things, I kind of bring them on camera. So I do want to mist down my whole piece of paper here, and I want to do that because when you're using watercolors, when you put them down onto dry paper, then they aren't going to move around as much, but I want these to be blending, and I've purposely used similar to the primary colors, so I want these to blend together and create other colors just a little bit as well. So I am going to make sure that there is a nice fine amount of water over the whole piece of watercolor paper here. Now I did mask off with a scrap piece that you saw a couple of those squares across the kind of middle to the right. You can see where they are now, and as I said, I am going to put quite a bit of water on this piece. So if this holds up, then I will be really impressed. I did notice there was one little piece up the top where I didn't press it down, and so it was just sitting on top of the paper. So I suspect that might leak, but we'll see when we pull it up at the end. Now, I found the yellow and the blue were just a little bit too light, so I did come in with, I think it's a bit of Salty Ocean, and just come over top so that I can add a little bit more and a little bit brighter, because these will dry back a little bit. Now, I know I'm using Distress Oxides, but the key here is that you can use watercolors, you can use your watercolor paints, you can use watercolor pencils, and then add water to them, so you can use all your watercolors for this technique. Next up, I'm going to be trying one with my alcohol markers. Now, this is the set that I have. These are a set of 24. Most loved set. I prefer the bullet tips just because of the kind of coloring that I do with alcohol markers. I don't absolutely love coloring with alcohol markers into like really big spaces, so I didn't go for the brush tip ones. I went for the bullet tip, and I'm glad I did. These have 3 markers in one, so they give you kind of all 3 shades, the light, the medium, and the dark. And this works out well for me because I don't have to kind of figure out which colors are going to blend nicely into one another. All of the hard work is done for me, and that's what I like about alcohol markers. So now this one is kind of less of a window technique, but more of just the masking. But I kind of thought that this would be a little bit of a challenge. It's something a little bit different than the other designs that I've used. And all I've done is taken really thin strips of that masking paper and just masked off into these little squares. Yes, I could draw these freehand, but that wasn't the look I was going for. I wanted those crisp, clean lines, really strong lines. So I just did a little pattern down there in a couple of light-ish colors. And then in the end, I'm going to finish all of these off into finished cards so you can see exactly what I would do with them, or what you could do with them, and turn these into. Now for this one, I'm just going to take 4 Distress Oxide colors. Now this one would look really cool with watercolors as well, because you could fade this out beautifully. So this is going to fade out. I wanted this one to have kind of a little bit of white in some of the squares as well. So I'm just going to do one corner in each colored ink, no blending, no blending colors together, sorry, and just going to fade out into white. Very simple. I'm able to use my finger daubers because that is just a little bit smaller than using the larger foam blenders. I find these perfect for these kind of small spaces. And as for the finger daubers, I tend to have roughly a light and a dark for colors that I don't use very often. And then I keep a finger dauber for a light, a medium, and a dark for the colors that I use a lot more often. Like the greens, I have probably 3 finger daubers. Sometimes when I can't find the color I want, or it looks like one's getting tatty, then I will get a new one out and pop it in. And so sometimes it looks like I might have 3 or 4 for the one color, but in general, that's what I aim for anyway. Kind of a light, a medium, and a dark for the popular colors, and then just a light and a dark for the ones I use less often. Okay, so let's quickly turn these into the cards. This is the Leaf Clusters stamp set from Altenew. This is a favorite. It's been out of stock in a lot of places, and that is really frustrating, but any kind of silhouette stamp is going to look beautiful here. Any foliage stamp, it doesn't even have to be a bold solid stamp. Anything that you can kind of do in a darker color, or you could choose for each of the different colors. So for example, the pink, you could do a darker pink ink on top of it. For the blue, you could do a darker blue ink. And then once I have stamped off those into each of the corners, all in different directions, my favorite part always is taking off the masking paper. And look at those beautiful, crisp, clean lines that we achieved with the masking paper. And then we can turn this one into a card. First of all, I'm going to pop a sentiment. That white space is just super easy to pop something into. So all the birthday stamp set, you guys know and love this one too. I do have this little piece here, but I need to cut this in half so that it goes side by side rather than being stacked. This is okay, I promise, because you can easily pop them back together on an acrylic block or on the lid of your stamping platform. And just because of the way that you've cut them, when they cut, you're easy to kind of pop them back and feel where they go together naturally, where they originally were. So it's no big deal. I'm using the same VersaFine Onyx black ink to stamp these because this is just a beautiful, crisp, clean stamping ink. Right, we're moving on to the first one that I did as well, removing those lines, and this is just beautiful and crisp. I did a card similar to this a little while ago, which I really loved the look of, so I'm going to do similar today. This tree is called, or the stamp set is called Old Oak Tree from Woodware. These are just a great company. I'm not sponsored or paid by them or anything at all, but I just think their stamps, these beautiful big stamps, have such a good price point. They stamp beautifully, and given the size of them, they generally have a really low price point, some of these. And if you've watched my channel for any amount of time, you'll know that I have those floral ones, which I absolutely love. Now, when it comes to crisp stamping, I love the VersaFine clear inks. This is the Pine Cone. This is a brown, kind of a dark brown. And just because I wanted this to be slightly darker, I'm going to double stamp this. Even though I got a pretty good impression first time around, I didn't want to go black because that was kind of quite harsh, but I thought I would go a couple of stampings of the brown. And then when I add it onto the background there, you can kind of see why it's called the window technique. That's what I'm calling it anyway. And I mean, it's masking, but it kind of looks like you're looking through a window. Now, of course, the tree wouldn't be in front of the window, but you never know. Doesn't really matter. We're in our own world when it comes to card making. At least I am anyway. Then I have my black and white sentiments from Paper Rose. I have 2 sets of these, the All Occasions and the black and white. So I just am loving all of these. I love this for a Get Well Soon card because it's nice and bright. I think this could be given to absolutely anyone at all, and I'm just going to pop this up on a little piece of foam tape and pop this down the base of the tree. Now, as I said, this was similar to a design I did not too long ago in a video, but keeping it really simple. Sometimes you don't have to rethink the wheel, you can just adjust and do something similar, which is going to work well too. So that is that card done and dusted. Moving on to the next card, which we kind of started before. Now I'm holding it up against the card base here, but I just felt like the white around the border wasn't quite working. When I feel like this, a really simple adjustment that I can make is adding a fine black matting layer. Now you can either add an actual piece of black cardstock and as a matting layer, or this is my little trick which I like doing, and this cuts out the bulk of adding a whole extra layer. I use a piece of low tack tape, I just lay it down against the side, and then I use the same VersaFine Onyx black ink that I used for the stamping in the card front here, and then I have got myself a a really, really nice little delicate frame around the outside without adding any of the bulk layer. Now where I'm going to put this down on my card base here, I probably should have spent the time to heat set this or let it dry. It is a pigment ink, so it's going to stay wet a little bit longer. Pigment ink sits on top of the paper, whereas dye ink will sink into the paper. So that's why it stays wet a little bit longer. So I'm kind of doing it a little bit delicately. I'm popping on some liquid glue onto the back, and that is this card finished too. Now we are moving on, and this is the card where I added a lot of water. This stamp set is called Mixed Stem. Again, it's another one of those gorgeous florals from Woodware, and I'm going to use some charming pink VersaFine clear ink, and I'm going to kind of mask off. I'm only going to do some of the squares. So I have kept the masking paper on the whole time while this is drying, and I did let these dry naturally. I actually had to come back to this later in the day, so these did all dry naturally, and I have going to mask off some of the little squares where I'm going to pop individual pieces of this stamp. Now I could just kind of have stamped the whole thing and things could have ended up where they ended up, but I decided to kind of pick apart this, and it kind of looks like you've got lots of different stamps that you've used, but really I'm just turning the stamp around using different parts of it for different little bits and pieces, and then that way we kind of looks like, as I said, you get a nice variation of the types of flowers and things that I have stamped. So I have just stamped them in every kind of almost every other square, give or take. And remember, we have this whole middle part here. I'm going to peel back the masking paper, and this has stayed beautiful and crisp, clean white, even with all of that water. Everything else stayed really good, which I was happy to see. As I said, this is the part where you take this off. You don't want to have that disappointing feeling of actually everything has bled underneath and seeped underneath, and you haven't got crisp lines anymore. So that avoids all this disappointment. I do think this is worth investing in. Next up, we have the big birthday words. This is going to fit in there beautifully, and I'm going to use the pink again because I use that to stamp out those floral images. So I'm just using my stamping platform because at this point I really don't want to muck up this card. We're at kind of the final stages and getting finished, so I'm going to stamp it down a couple of times, making sure that this is nice and crisp, and then this one is nearly good to go too. I did think that because this card already had so much white going through the center of it, that I would add the charming pink color straight to the card base, and then this would kind of look like it was on a pink card base, except for the fact that we would have white on the inside. So just a really little slither of the pink showing through on the outside, and this one is very simple. Again, all of these cards are really simple, and you could add a whole lot more bling to them. You could add some Nuvo drops, you could add some enamel dots, you could add gems, anything that you wanted to, but I wanted to keep it super simple just to show you all the different versions. Okay, moving on to the last one, we have the one where I use the alcohol markers. Once I have pulled off that mask, which comes off beautifully, there is no risk of this ripping your paper, which is perfect. I was kind of figuring out how to do this one because so far I don't have a lot going on the page. It's pretty plain, but I have the Lacey Edges one. This is from Pinkfresh Studios. These are just some beautiful lacy edges that you can kind of add. I did think this would be really nice if you could add some real lace rather than die cuts, but die cuts is what I have, and so I already had these two cut out, and these were in the back of the packet, which is where I store my extra die cuts, and so I'm not going to go to the effort and energy of die cutting something else. I may as well use up something that I've already done. And then I decide to do one of the same colors that I used on the front there, and I'm just going to give this a little bit of an ombre effect. It's really, really subtle. I just add a little bit of the darker color down the bottom and then lighter towards the edge, but just really quickly going over it. Again, of course, you could do this in colored paper. You could use inks to do this. You can use anything. Just use what you have. Then I have the All the Birthdays stamp set. I love this beautiful, big, bold, happy birthday. It takes up the perfect amount of space. And then I'm going to pop the little birthday word underneath, stamping it in some VersaFine Onyx Black ink again to get a really crisp, clear image. And then again, this card is going to be super, super simple. I'm going to add the lacy little edge coming off the left there. And again, I think this just dresses it up just a little bit more. I love this. I love the extra little bit that this provides. I added some foam tape to the back, and then I'm going to pop this kind of in the middle so that there's a little bit of space to the left and the right. And the foam tape just lifts it up and gives it that extra little something, in my opinion. So really plain, but I like this version. As usual, there will be links to the products that I've used in the description box below this video, as well as other ways that you can support my channel. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've found some of this information useful, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thanks, bye!